Have you ever caught yourself acting a certain way in public, only to later wonder, is that really me? This kind of situation happens more often than we realize, and Carl Jung had an interesting explanation for it. He called this mask we wear every day the persona. The persona is like the outfit we choose for a party, you know? We wear it to make a specific impression on others. Depending on the place and the people, the outfit changes. At work, we put on a more serious, maybe more controlled persona. With friends, we wear a lighter, more relaxed mask. It's almost as if we're constantly acting in a play, adjusting our role according to the audience. But does this mask really represent who we are? What if we're just showing what we think others want to see? That's where the danger lies. The persona isn't necessarily a bad thing. It helps us navigate society's expectations. But if we start believing that this mask is our true essence, we lose something important, our real self. The persona is essentially the way we find to adapt to the world. Think of it as a kind of social uniform. We all wear one. From a young age, we learn that certain behaviors are more acceptable than others. At school, in the family, at work, that polite smile in the middle of a difficult conversation, it could be your persona at work. The "I'm fine" you say even when things aren't fine, that's also part of it. It plays an important role. Without this mask, it would be hard to interact with the demands life places on us. For example, when you're at work, it's necessary to maintain a certain composure, a posture that the company expects. Imagine a doctor who, in the middle of a critical situation, shows all their anxieties and insecurities. Their mask of professionalism not only protects them, but also ensures they can handle difficult situations in a functional way. But what does this mean for us in our day-to-day lives? In many situations, our persona helps soften what we really feel or think. And that's the big question. How much of our time are we just playing roles? In a conversation with a coworker, you might not feel completely comfortable being honest about what you think. So you put on a mask, act politely, remain contained. It's part of the social game. The problem arises when we spend so much time acting that we start to confuse this mask with our true essence. Are we, in trying to be what others expect, hiding too much of who we really are? Or worse, have we forgotten what it's like to be ourselves? The persona is, without a doubt, a useful tool, but like any tool, it can be misused. Now imagine that this mask you wear every day starts to stick to your face. After so much time wearing this persona, you begin to believe that it's who you truly are. And that can be frightening. When we over-identify with this mask, we start losing sight of our real self. It's like living in a role that, deep down, doesn't belong to us. Have you ever met someone who always seems to be performing? Someone so trapped in what others expect of them that in the end, you don't even know who they really are anymore? It could be a boss who has become the embodiment of authority, or a friend who has bent so much to please others that you barely recognize them. And the worst part? That person might be you. The trap here is that the more we identify with the persona, the further we drift from our essence, and that creates a void. After all, the more we distance ourselves from who we really are, the more we depend on others' approval to feel whole. Our identity becomes fragile because it's based on what others see, not on what we truly are. The danger is when the mask falls, and it always does, sooner or later, we may find ourselves lost. When life forces us to face something unexpected, like losing a job or the end of a relationship, what remains when the persona can no longer sustain the image we've built? The discomfort of realizing that what we've shown the world isn't who we really are can lead to a crisis. And this is not a simple crisis. It's one that makes us question everything. If I'm not this mask, who am I? And more importantly, how can we begin to discover the real self after so much time pretending to be something we're not? These are the dangers of the persona. It protects us, yes, but it can trap us in the illusion that we are only what we show. Now imagine the moment when this mask, the one you've spent so much time perfecting, begins to crack. You can no longer keep it in place. The persona, this controlled, carefully crafted version of yourself, starts to fall apart. This is what Jung called the disintegration of the persona. And it's not pretty. When the mask falls, you find yourself in a space of chaos and confusion. Suddenly, everything that once seemed so certain, so structured, loses its meaning. It's like being on stage, playing a role you've known for years, and suddenly the lights go out. The audience disappears, the costume is taken off, and the actor who is you is left there. Alone, not knowing what their true face looks like anymore. This disintegration can be triggered by many factors. Maybe it's the end of a relationship that defined you. Maybe you've invested so much of yourself in a career that, when it's gone, you have no idea who you are without the title. Or perhaps it's a deep emotional shock, something that forces you to look in the mirror and see for the first time that the face you showed the world was never really yours. This collapse can be devastating because it exposes the emptiness of not knowing who you are. Without the persona to guide you, you may fall into an existential crisis. If I'm not this role, this job, this relationship, what's left of me? It's a terrifying question, but also a transformative one. Disintegration, though painful, is an opportunity. It forces us to confront what lies behind the mask. And yes, what we find can be frightening. Our vulnerabilities, insecurities, and fears that have been hidden for so long. But there's also untapped potential there. Something real that has been repressed by the need to adapt to others' expectations. This is the moment when you face the void and have the chance to rebuild yourself. Letting the mask fall may seem like the end, but in truth, it can be the beginning of something new. Something more authentic. And that's when we start to discover who we really are. When the persona crumbles and we finally look at what has been hidden for so long. When the mask falls, what's left is our true self, and this idea can be both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because we finally have the chance to reconnect with who we really are. Terrifying because, sometimes, we have no idea who that person truly is. Facing the true self takes courage. It's like looking in a mirror without any filters, without any embellishment. But unlike the image we project to others, this reflection might not be as pretty. It brings to light our imperfections, our fears, our repressed desires, things we've spent a lifetime trying to hide, even from ourselves. But why do we run from this so much? Maybe it's the fear of not being accepted for who we really are. Or perhaps it's because we believe the version of ourselves we've created, with all its masks, is more interesting or more suitable. But living disconnected from our true self is in reality only living half a life. When we face the true self, we start to understand our deeper motivations. It's no longer about pleasing others or fulfilling external expectations. It's about discovering what you truly want, what you value, who you want to be. And that goes far beyond the masks we wear every day. This journey of self-discovery can be painful because it demands that we accept not only our strengths but also our weaknesses. Those aspects of ourselves that were repressed because we thought they weren't good enough for the world. However, that's where our real strength lies. Because when we embrace who we really are, flaws and all, we gain immense freedom. Facing the true self is above all a process of reconciliation. A reconciliation between what we show the world and what we are inside. It's the chance to finally live authentically without the constant weight of trying to be someone else. It might be a long and challenging path, but it's the only one that leads to true freedom. Because in the end, there's no mask that compares to the power of being who you really are. The concept of the shadow is undoubtedly one of Jung's most intriguing ideas. Imagine the shadow as that part of you that you'd rather not show, the one you keep hidden away in a dark corner, far from everyone's eyes, including your own. It's your fears, your weaknesses, your desires that don't fit the image you've built for the world. But this repressed part of us doesn't simply disappear because it's ignored. On the contrary, the more we deny it, the stronger it becomes. The shadow is formed early in life. As children, we quickly learn what is considered acceptable and what isn't. If we're told that being assertive is rude, we might become passive. If we're taught that showing emotions is a sign of weakness, we may grow cold. And all these parts of us that we can't express end up being pushed into the shadow. But the thing is, it never really goes away. It just hides, waiting for the right moment to make itself known. So, how does it show up? You've probably experienced this before. An overreaction to something small, an uncontrollable burst of anger, or a deep sadness that seems to come out of nowhere. These are moments when our shadow surfaces, almost as if it takes control for a brief moment. And often it scares us because it's a part of ourselves we've tried so hard to keep hidden. But ignoring it doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it can leave us vulnerable to it. Jung believed that, in order to truly know ourselves, we have to face the shadow. There's no self-knowledge without confronting the things we've been avoiding. And this is crucial because the shadow isn't just a repository of negative things. It also holds valuable aspects of our personality that we've repressed out of fear of judgment. Maybe your shadow carries a creative talent you've suppressed for years, or an emotional strength you didn't know you had. The secret is learning to negotiate with the shadow. It's not about fighting it or trying to destroy it, but about integrating it. Recognizing that it's part of you, just like any other trait. When we can look at our shadow without fear or rejection, we begin to reclaim parts of ourselves that have been lost. Facing the shadow is a crucial step in the process of self-knowledge because it allows us to be honest about who we truly are. Not just with others, but, more importantly, with ourselves. And that honesty is what leads to real growth. Because when we accept our weaknesses, we also begin to uncover our true strengths. After all, the shadow only becomes dangerous when we ignore it. When we acknowledge it, it can become a powerful ally on our journey to wholeness. Now, imagine just how deeply our masks are shaped by the world around us. The persona doesn't come out of nowhere. It's largely created from society's expectations. From a young age, we're taught what's acceptable and what isn't. And this external pressure starts to mold the masks we wear, not just to fit in, but to survive in this social game. Think, for example, about professions that demand a specific persona. A lawyer has to wear the mask of confidence and control. A teacher must adopt the mask of patience and wisdom. Even an artist, who often prides themselves on authenticity, is forced to assume a mask, the creative genius, always inspired and emotionally deep. Society imposes these expectations on us, and at some point, we might start believing that we are these masks. This is part of what Jung referred to as the conformity archetype, where the persona not only helps us function in society, but ends up trapping us in a role. And the pressure is relentless. Social media, for instance, intensifies this phenomenon. Through our screens, we're bombarded with images of success, happiness, and perfection. Society creates standards that push us to wear masks that often have little to do with who we are inside. Have you noticed how there's always this effort to project the perfect image online? A feed full of smiles and achievements, as if our lives were a display window, carefully curated to impress. That's the persona at work. But here's the danger. The more we allow ourselves to be shaped by these external expectations, the further we drift from our true selves. If society says that success is synonymous with a prestigious career, maybe you'll end up pouring time and energy into something that doesn't resonate with your internal values, just to maintain that facade. And when you finally stop to reflect, you might ask yourself, is this really what I want, or is it just what's expected of me? This disconnect between the persona and the inner self can be incredibly draining. The mask, which was meant to be a tool to help us navigate the world, becomes a prison. Jung said that if we identify completely with the persona, we become trapped in a cycle of total adaptation to the external world and almost no adaptation to our inner world. We lose the balance between who we are and what we show. So, how do we break free from this cycle? The key is becoming aware of this dynamic, recognizing that, yes, we need a persona to function in society, but it should never replace our individuality. We are not just the masks we wear for work, family, or friends. True freedom comes when we can use the persona consciously, without losing touch with who we truly are inside. Because at the end of the day, living solely to meet the expectations of the collective is a dangerous path. And real fulfillment only comes when we find a balance between what the world expects of us. So, we've come to the big question: how can we restore our true identity and live authentically? After spending so much time wearing masks and adapting to external expectations, it may seem difficult, but it's not impossible. In fact, the path to authenticity starts with something simple, yet powerful: awareness. The first step is recognizing that we wear masks, admitting that at times we hide behind a persona to be accepted or to avoid conflict. And that's okay. There's no shame in it. We all do it. The problem only arises when we forget that the mask is just a tool, not our essence. Once we become aware of this divide, we can start to make changes. This is where real transformation begins. To live authentically, we need to stop running from who we truly are. We need to face what's behind the persona, our vulnerabilities, desires, and fears. This requires honesty. Honesty with ourselves, first and foremost. It's about looking in the mirror, and instead of focusing only on what others see, trying to see who is truly behind the mask. And here's a liberating truth. Living authentically doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean eliminating all your insecurities. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about accepting that we're imperfect, and that's okay. It's understanding that the persona is part of life, but it can never be all of who we are. Authenticity comes when you find the courage to be vulnerable, to show who you are, even if it's not always the ideal version you or others expect. So how do we start? Take small steps. Begin to make choices that reflect more of your true self and less of what you think others want. Ask yourself, is this something that truly makes me happy, or is it just another attempt to please? Challenge the idea that you need to live up to everyone's expectations all the time. And above all, remember that this is a continuous process. Restoring your true identity doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. There will be moments when the mask tries to come back, and that's okay. What's important is that, little by little, you learn to use it consciously, without letting it define who you are. Living authentically means finding a balance between the persona you use to navigate the world and the true self that pulses beneath it. It's knowing that you can show the world who you really are, with all your imperfections. And that, there's nothing more freeing than that. Before we go, I want to ask you a question. Have you thought about which masks you've been wearing lately? If this video made you reflect on the persona and how it impacts your life, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you're looking for more ways to connect with your true self, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any content. Share this video with someone you think might also need to hear this message. The more we discuss these topics, the closer we get to living authentically. See you in the next video.